everyone, Jason from Alphatone Audio back again. Now if you watch this channel, I assume that you probably build a lot of your own audio cables, or at least interested in starting to build your own audio cables. But even if you're pretty experienced and you've been building cables for a long time like I have, chances are you still have a couple of these little like weird molded no-name cables that goes from whatever connector to plug in that one piece of gear, whatever. And you know, they're fine, they generally work, they're generally just not the most durable thing, and sometimes just fall apart and you can't really fix them because everything's molded, so you really can't get in there and do any kind of repairs or modifications. So normally something like this breaks, you end up just like throwing the thing away and having to get another one. Now the thing about it is, I really want to talk about this end of the cable tonight, which is the 1/8 inch TRS plug, and you're starting to see this particular connector on all kinds of gear. Lots of pedals are starting to come out with them, lots of synthesizers. Drum machines have individual outputs that are the 1/8 inch variety. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at a bunch of parts tonight, specifically of the 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter variety, so you can actually start building some of your own cables and you don't have to build this pre-made stuff. So when you get into the 1/8 inch parts, you definitely have to pay attention to the cable opening on all of these plugs, because they're just not going to accept full-size cable. So with that in mind, I want to talk about 3 very small cables we have in front of us. These are all from Mogami, and the intended purpose on these is microphone lavalier cable. So these are all normal balanced microphone cables, just very, very small. Starting with the very smallest one all the way down to 2.2 millimeters, going up to 2.8 millimeters. And as a point of reference, these are just some standard Apple earbuds, and they kind of align with the smallest one. And then on the larger end, we have some Mogami 2552 microphone cable, and they actually call this their low-cost performance cable, but I mean, I find this is just fine. Their high-end cable, the 2549, that's actually 6 millimeters, so it's only just 1 millimeter bigger than this. But still, the difference between fitting a 2.8 millimeter cable and a 5 millimeter cable through a plug that won't accept it, it's the difference between getting your cable built and not getting it built. So in case you want to use some of the smaller plugs on there, you might want to take a look at these part numbers. Starting from the very smallest one, this one is 2901, and then going up to the next smallest one, we have 2697, and we have 3031. So the thing about this one, and I probably won't recommend this right off the bat, even though it's the smallest one, Mogami actually said that this is the strongest out of the series that they make. The tensile strength is the highest on this one. And you actually take a bit of an audio hit to get that strength, because instead of just using standard copper, according to their documentation, they actually use a copper tin alloy. And another thing that makes this strong is it's actually a double shielded cable, so it's actually a spiral shield wrapped around another spiral shield. So I guess the people that need this particular cable, they know they need it and they're going to get it. I tend to gravitate towards one of these other choices over here. So again, like I said, this is the 2697 and a 3031, both identical to one another except for the shield type. This one has the standard spiral shield on it, and this one has the braided shield, as you can tell. And like I said, I think my personal preference out of the 3 is the 3031. Some people don't like the braided shield because it is a little bit more work. You have to go through and unbraid the shield, but I don't really find it's that big a deal, and I like the extra durability that you get with the braided shield. Some people also say the braided shield is more stiff, but honestly on cable this size, I don't really think it makes a difference. First part we're going to look at is from Amphenol, and this is the KS3P. And there's a couple things I like about the Amphenol connectors in general. I find they're a really good balance between price and performance. They're not as heavy duty as like a Neutrik, and when I say heavy duty, I mean they're literally a bit lighter because they just don't use quite as much metal, but they're definitely a lot better than a lot of the cheap stuff you'll find on Amazon or eBay or something like that, kind of like no-name parts. I've never had any problems soldering these up. They always have like very good solderability. I've never had any quality control problems, and I've been through hundreds and hundreds of these plugs, and I've never gotten a bad one from the manufacturer. So again, if you want to save a few dollars but you still want a quality durable plug for your studio, then these are just perfectly fine. I mean, would I take them all around the world with me? I don't know. I'd probably go with the Neutrik on something like that, but overall I generally like the brand. It is a good price performance ratio. As far as the 1/8 inch parts, you can get these in the nickel finish or the black finish, and you can also get these in tip sleeve as well as tip ring sleeve. The only thing I don't really like about the 1/8 inch parts from Amphenol is they tend to have, well, they don't tend to have, they actually have 3 fingers on the strain relief, and I normally just take this first one that's closest to the tabs here, and I'll either just cut it off, which is very easy to do. You just get dikes and you can just take it right off, or I'll actually just use it to like trap my shield, and I'll solder that in place, and I'll just use these back two as the actual strain relief. Other than that, I think it's a great part. Next up, we have a couple parts from Rheem. These guys, which is Neutrik's budget brand. This is the NYS231L, and this is the NYS240L, male and female connectors. and where the L stands for large. Why? Because you can get a standard NYS 241, which is this NYS 241. You can get the NYS 241L. Okay, this has a 4mm opening. This has the 6mm opening, and you can even get an NYS 231LL, which has an 8mm opening. So depending on what cable you're going to use, you can get the appropriate size barrel on the plug. Again, good brand, good parts. I really like these. In fact, these are probably a little bit easier to assemble than the Amphenols, but it's really just a matter of what you can find and what you can get. But again, this is the first time we're looking at the female connector here. Like I said, in case you just want to make extensions, which is cool. I really like those. Next up, we have the F12 from Canary, which is a really huge, chunky, almost kind of old school looking plug. And what looks to be a Canary port, but it actually isn't. This is actually made from BTPA or Bestronix audio, and this is a female jack. So if you wanted like a big, chunky pair of parts, you get a male and a female, and again, these look nearly identical finish wise. Good thing about this is it has a truly huge strain relief on it, so you could use just about any cable you want with it. Although on the BTPA version it's a little bit smaller, although you can still probably get into like 25-52 range with these if you wanted to. Next up, we have Switchcraft. We have lots of parts here because they have lots of options, and these are some of my favorite. The only downside being is they tend to be very expensive compared to everything else. You're looking about $7 to almost $14 each for some of these parts, but great build quality. I think they're just about the right size, not too big, not too small, and plus all the options between finishing and form factor, and I think it makes it a really solid choice. So I do want to talk about the part numbering on these just a little bit because they do make so many different versions of this. It can be a little bit confusing, but just like the Neutrik plugs, there is a method to their madness. So everything is the 35 HD series. 35, I assume, is for 3.5mm. HD is just their series. You could have RA for right angle. You'll have a letter for the body finish, which is either B for black or N for nickel. Then you'll have the tip finish, which is either N for nickel or AU for gold. And then optionally, you also have an S, which has to do with the exit hole size. The standard size on these is 0.29 inches, just a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch. Or if there's no S, or sorry, if there's an S, then it's 0.175 inches. So the S stands for small. It's kind of the opposite of how Rheem did it, where they did L for large. Switchcraft does the S for small. So with all that said, that makes this particular right angle plug 3.5mm with the gold tip and the black body. This is the 35 HD RABAU plug. So I hope that helps. But like I said, these are some of my favorites. You can easily use some of the better mic cable on this. Like again, you're into 25-52 range on these. The assembly is pretty good. And again, I use Switchcraft all the time on my standard products. I've always been happy with the consistency and the quality of the brand. And like I said, there's plenty of choices here between the straight, the right angle, and even the female in this one if you want to get into the extension. So definitely like these parts a lot. Next up, we have some plugs from Redco Audio, and this is just Redco branded parts, and redco.com, they had a great supplier of all things audio and plugs and cable and panels and all that kinds of stuff, and I get parts from them on quite a regular basis. And they don't make a lot of large variety of plugs, but they do make some plugs, and they do make some cable as well. And I find that anytime I've gone for the Redco stuff, it's usually for a reason. They usually have pretty good quality on their stuff, and it's usually pretty affordable as well. So over here, starting off with just their standard large straight plug, this is the SMSBG. This is a good choice if you're just getting started with this and you're not super confident with your soldering, but you want to get into some of the 1/8 inch stuff. This would be a good plug for you because this probably has the most room on the inside of the plug for you to actually perform the assembly. Now, I will talk about these two as well, and the reason I want to talk about these is they make these, the right angle and they're straight. One, they make them in both TRS and TRRS in case you want to get into, making a control cable for your phone or something like that. But also, these are pretty small. This is a little bit smaller than the Switchcraft right angles, and this straight plug, this is probably about the smallest one you're going to find. I don't know if you really want to try to assemble anything smaller than that, but if you want the absolute smallest straight plug that you can find, I think this is probably the one. So again, the Redco house brand, they don't make a lot of stuff, but I tend to like most of the parts that they do make. This is a good choice. One, if you want a good one for beginners, something that's easy to assemble. It also takes a really large cable, or if you want the TRRS parts, or if you just want the absolute smallest straight plug that you can get. Last but not least, we have the Neutrik NTP3RC, and the reason I included this one is because this is absolutely the smallest right angle plug that you can get. The only downside is you can't really use a particularly large mic cable with it. You would have to use like one of the compact ones, like the 3031 I talked about at the very beginning of the video. But if you're okay with that, then this is a good option for you. One, because I always like the Neutrik quality, but two, this one actually comes in at quite a bit cheaper than the Switchcraft parts. So if you're looking for a quality part and you still want to save a little bit of money, this would be a good choice for you. I hope this was helpful for you. If it was helpful, please consider liking and subscribing, or at the very least, next time you need to build some 1/8 inch cables, particularly of the TRS variety, maybe consider getting your parts and trying to do it yourself instead of buying another one of these things. Take care.